The rain drumming against the thatched roof had become Brenna Thorne's only companion on nights like these. When the loneliness pressed so hard against her chest, she wondered if even her orc constitution could bear it much longer. She sat at her rough-hewn table, mending a shirt by candlelight, her green fingers working the needle with practiced efficiency through the fabric. 7 years she had lived in this cottage at the edge of the Westmark frontier, where the forest met the farmland and civilized folk rarely ventured. 7 years since she had watched him ride away down that muddy track, his shoulders squared against a future that apparently had no room for an orc woman in it. The knock at her door came so suddenly that she pricked her thumb, a bead of dark blood welling up. She froze, listening. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Brenna," a voice called through the wood. "Brenna, it's me." Her heart stopped, then started again with such force she thought it might crack her ribs. That voice. She knew that voice the way she knew the sound of her own breathing, even though 7 years had roughened it slightly, deepened it around the edges. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and crossed to the door. Her hand hesitated on the latch. What if she was wrong? What if loneliness had finally driven her mad and she was imagining things? But no, there came another knock, and she could hear him breathing on the other side, could almost feel the warmth of him through the wood. She opened the door. Jared Quinlan stood on her threshold, soaked through from the rain, water dripping from his dark hair into his eyes. He looked older, his face leaner and marked with lines that had not been there before. But his eyes, those gray eyes that had haunted her dreams for 7 long years, were exactly the same. "Hello, Brenna," he said quietly. She could not speak. Words had abandoned her entirely. She just stood there, her hand still gripping the door, staring at him as if he might vanish like morning mist. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped back wordlessly, and he entered, bringing with him the smell of rain and horses and leather. He was dressed like a man of means now, she noticed. His cloak was fine wool, his boots good quality. The boy who had left her had been a simple soldier. This man who returned looked like he had found his fortune somewhere in the wide world. He turned to face her, and they stood there in the flickering candlelight, the rain still hammering on the roof above them, neither quite knowing where to begin. "You're wet," she finally managed, her voice coming out hoarser than she intended. "I rode straight through," he said. "Didn't want to stop, didn't want to give myself time to lose my nerve." "Nerve for what?" Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Her breath caught. He opened it, revealing a gold ring set with a simple green stone that matched the color of her skin. "I came back to ask you to marry me," he said. "I should have asked 7 years ago. I should have taken you with me when I left. I should have done 1,000 things differently, but I was young and stupid and scared." "I'm still scared, Brenna, but I'm not stupid anymore, and I'm done being a coward about the only thing that ever mattered." Brenna felt her tusks catch on her lower lip as her mouth opened in shock. Of all the things she had imagined over the years, all the scenarios she had played out in her head during sleepless nights, this had never been one of them. "You left," she said, and the words came out sharper than she intended, edged with all the hurt she had tried to bury. "You rode away and you didn't write, didn't send word. 7 years, Jared, 7 years of nothing." "I know," he said, and the misery in his voice was so genuine it made her chest ache. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. But first I need to explain. I need you to understand why." "Then explain," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. She would not make this easy for him. She could not. 7 years of hurt could not be washed away by rain and a pretty ring, no matter how much she wanted them to be. He set the ring box on the table and ran his hand through his wet hair. "When I left, I was just a conscript who'd served his mandatory 5 years in the border guard. I had no land, no prospects, no money beyond my discharge pay. You remember what it was like." She did remember. He had come to her cottage often during his last year of service, drawn first by curiosity about the orc woman who lived alone in the woods, then by something deeper that neither of them had quite known how to name. They had talked for hours, shared meals, shared warmth on cold nights. She had let herself hope, fool that she was. "I remember you saying you loved me," she said quietly. "The night before you left, you said you loved me." "I did. I do." He took a step toward her, then stopped when she did not move. "That's why I left, Brenna. I looked at what I had to offer you, and it was nothing. A soldier's pension that would barely feed one person, let alone two. No land, no home, no future. And you had this place. You had your garden, your chickens, your life. I couldn't ask you to give that up to follow me when I didn't know where I was going or how I'd survive. You could have asked me what I wanted," she shot back. "You could have trusted me to make my own choice instead of making it for me." "You're right," he said simply. "You're absolutely right, and I was wrong. I was a coward and a fool, and I justified it to myself by saying I was being noble. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of failing you, scared of what people would say, scared of dragging you down into poverty with me." She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold onto her righteous fury, but the honesty in his voice was eroding her defenses faster than water wore down stone. "Where did you go?" she asked. "North, to the Iron Hills," he said. "I'd heard there were opportunities there for men willing to work hard and risk their necks. I hired on as a guard for a mining consortium, spent 2 years fighting off bandits and worse. The pay was good, but more than that, I learned the business. Learned how to spot a good claim, how to manage men, how to negotiate with merchants. After 2 years, I'd saved enough to buy a small stake in one of the mines." He paused, as if waiting for her to say something, but she just watched him, her green eyes unreadable. "The mine did well," he continued. "Better than well. Within 3 years, I'd bought out my partners and expanded. I hired good people, treated them fairly, and the business grew. I'm not a wealthy man by noble standards, but I'm comfortable. I have property now, Brenna. Land and a house near a town called Greystone. It's on the frontier like here, but bigger. There are other orcs there, and humans who have learned to live alongside them without hatred. It's not perfect, but it's better than most places. And in all that time, you couldn't send a letter." The words came out softer than she intended, but the hurt in them was unmistakable. He flinched. "I started 100 letters, more than 100, but what could I say? Dear Brenna, I'm sorry I left you, but I'm not ready to come back yet." Every letter felt like a new betrayal, a new broken promise. "I told myself I would come back when I had something real to offer you, when I could stand before you as a man worthy of you. I never needed you to be worthy," she said, and now her voice broke despite her best efforts. "I just needed you to be here." "I know," he whispered. "I know, and that's the worst part. I was so focused on becoming someone who could provide for you that I forgot what you actually wanted was just me. Just Jared, not a mine owner or a man of property. Just the idiot soldier who fell in love with an orc woman and didn't know how to handle it." The tears came then, hot and bitter, running down her green cheeks. She tried to wipe them away, angry at herself for showing weakness, but they kept coming. Jared crossed the space between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, meaning to push him away to maintain her dignity. But then his warmth enveloped her, and the scent of him filled her nose, older and different but still fundamentally him, and she collapsed against his chest, 7 years of loneliness pouring out of her in great, shuddering sobs. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair over and over. I'm so sorry, Brenna. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry I was too much of a coward to even write. I'm sorry for all of it. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was hollow and exhausted, and through it all he held her, his arms steady and strong around her, his hands stroking her back in slow, soothing circles. Finally, she pulled back, wiping at her face with the heels of her hands. "I look a mess," she muttered. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart twist. She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You always were a terrible liar." "I'm not lying." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gentle on her cheekbones. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And that was true 7 years ago, and it's true now, and it'll be true 7 decades from now if you'll let me stick around long enough to see it." "Jared," she started, but he shook his head. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he said. "I know I broke your trust and your heart, and I know that's not something I can fix with pretty words and a ring. But I'm asking anyway because I've spent 7 years without you and I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. I love you, Brenna Thorne. I loved you when I left. I loved you every day I was gone, and I'll love you until I die. Will you marry me?" She looked up at him, at this man who had left her and somehow found his way back, and she knew what her answer should be. She should tell him no. She should protect her heart, guard it against the possibility of future pain. She should send him away and build her walls higher and never let anyone close enough to hurt her again. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I need time." He nodded, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he did not argue. "That's fair. That's more than fair. How much time?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I need to think, Jared. I need to figure out if I can trust you again, if I can forgive you." "I understand." He stepped back, giving her space. "Where should I go? Is there an inn nearby?" She almost laughed. "The nearest inn is half a day's ride from here. That's why I built this place, remember, to get away from people." "Right." He looked around the small cottage, clearly trying to work out the logistics. "You can sleep in the barn," she said. "It's dry and there's hay for bedding. Not comfortable, but better than riding half the night in the rain." "The barn is fine," he said quickly. "More than fine, thank you." An awkward silence fell between them. 7 years apart, and they had forgotten how to navigate the simple mechanics of being in the same room. "Are you hungry?" Brenna asked finally, falling back on the basic hospitality that had been drilled into her since childhood. "I have stew left from dinner." "I'm starving," he admitted. "I haven't eaten since morning." She ladled out a bowl for him, and he sat at her table, right where he used to sit all those years ago. The sight of him there, solid and real, made her throat tight. She sat across from him with her own bowl, though she had already eaten. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of his spoon against the bowl and the rain still falling outside. "This is good," he said. "You always were a better cook than you gave yourself credit for." "It's just stew," she said, but she felt a small, traitorous warmth at the compliment. "Tell me about these 7 years," he said. "What have you been doing? Are you still taking in injured animals?" Despite herself, she smiled slightly. "A few. I had a deer with a broken leg last winter. And there's a fox that comes around sometimes, one I treated for an infected paw a few years back. She's not tame, but she's not afraid of me either." "That sounds like you," he said softly. "Always helping things that everyone else has given up on. Is that what you think you are?" She asked sharply. "Some injured thing for me to nurse back to health? No," he said. "I think I'm a man who made terrible mistakes and is trying to make them right, that's all." She subsided, picking at a loose thread in her sleeve. "I've been doing more than tending animals," she said after a moment. "I've been selling herbs and remedies to some of the settlements south of here. It brings in a little money." "The humans buy from you," he sounded surprised. "Some do. the ones desperate enough. Orcs are good at healing, and people remember that when their child is sick or their wound won't stop festering. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he could hear the bitterness underneath. It shouldn't be like that, he said quietly, but it is. It always has been. She met his eyes. Did you think about that? When you were up in the Iron Hills making your fortune, did you think about what it would be like for an orc woman married to a human man? The stares, the whispers, the hatred. Every day, he said. That's part of why I chose Greystone. It's not perfect, but there are mixed couples there. Human and orc, human and dwarf, even a few elves. The frontier attracts people who don't fit in elsewhere, people who have learned to judge others by their character instead of their blood. That sounds like a fantasy, she said. It's not. I swear to you, it's not. I wouldn't ask you to walk into the same hatred you've faced here. I wouldn't do that to you. She wanted to believe him. The yearning in her chest was almost painful, but 7 years of loneliness had taught her caution. Tell me about your house, she said, changing the subject slightly. His face brightened. It's wood, good solid timber, 2 stories. There's a main room with a big fireplace and a kitchen with a real stove, not just a hearth. 3 bedrooms upstairs. And land, Brenna. 20 acres with a stream running through it. There's space for a garden, for animals if you want them, space to breathe. You built all that for yourself, she asked. I built it for us, he said quietly. Every nail, every board. I kept thinking about what you would like, what would make you happy. There's a window in the kitchen that faces east so you can watch the sunrise like you used to talk about. And I planted an herb garden, though I'm not much of a gardener, so it's pretty pathetic. I was hoping you could fix it. The image he painted was so vivid, so carefully thought out that it hurt. He had been planning this, dreaming of this, while she had been here alone, trying to convince herself she did not need anyone. Why now? She asked. Why not 5 years ago, or 3? Why wait 7 years? He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his empty bowl. Fear, mostly, he finally said. Fear that I hadn't built enough yet, that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Fear that you'd moved on, found someone else. Fear that you'd just tell me to go to hell, which I would have deserved. He looked up at her. But 3 months ago, I was sitting in my empty house, and I realized I was still waiting for some perfect moment that was never going to come. And I thought, what if she's waiting too? What if we're both waiting for something that we could just reach out and take? So I decided to stop being a coward. I sold my stake in the mine to my second in command, packed what I needed, and rode south. You sold the mine, she stared at him, but that was your livelihood. I kept enough assets to live comfortably, he said. The house, some investments, money in the bank, but I didn't need the mine anymore. I built it to give us a future. Once I had that, the mine was just work, and I realized I'd rather have a future with you than all the gold in the Iron Hills. Brenna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This was too much, too fast. 7 years of nothing, and then this flood of words and feelings and possibilities. She needed air, needed space to think. I need to feed the chickens, she said, knowing it was a flimsy excuse. She had fed them hours ago. Brenna, he started, but she was already grabbing her cloak and heading for the door. Stay here where it's dry, she said. I won't be long. She stepped out into the rain, letting it wash over her face and mix with the tears that had started again. The chickens were already roosting, safe in their coop, but she went through the motions anyway, checking their water, counting heads, anything to avoid going back inside and facing the choice that waited for her there. The barn was dark and warm, smelling of hay and horses. Jared's mount, a fine roan gelding, stood in one of the stalls, already unsaddled and munched contentedly on the hay Jared must have given him before coming to the door. Even drenched and exhausted, he had thought to care for his horse first. That was the Jared she remembered, the one who had always put others before himself. She sat down on a hay bale and let herself really think about what he was offering. A new life in a new place, with a man who had already left her once. Could she trust him not to do it again? Could she forgive him for the 7 years of silence? But then, what was her alternative? To stay here alone in her cottage, growing old with no one but injured animals for company. To spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she had just been brave enough to take the risk. She thought about the way he had held her while she cried, steady and solid. The way he had admitted his mistakes without excuses or justifications. The way his voice had cracked when he talked about building a house for them, for a future he had not been sure would ever come. He had hurt her. But he had also loved her in his clumsy, misguided way. And he had come back. That mattered. After 7 years, he had come back with a ring and a house and a future, and he was asking, not demanding, giving her the choice he should have given her all those years ago. The rain was starting to let up when she finally made her way back to the cottage. Jared was still at the table, his head in his hands, looking as miserable as she had ever seen him. He looked up when she entered, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I'm not ready to say yes," she said before he could speak. "I'm not ready to forgive you, not completely. What you did hurt me, Jared, more than I know how to express." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand." "But," she continued, and his eyes snapped back to hers, "I'm not ready to say no either. I need time to know you again to see if the man you are now is someone I can trust. So here's what I'm proposing. You stay. Not in the barn, that's ridiculous. You can sleep in here by the fire. We'll spend time together, talk, work together. And in a month, maybe 2, I'll give you my answer." "A month," he repeated, and the relief on his face was almost painful to see. "You're giving me a month." "Maybe 2, she corrected. "However long it takes for me to decide. And Jared, if I decide the answer is no, you have to accept that. No arguments, no trying to change my mind. You ride away and you don't come back. Can you agree to that?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I promise." "All right, then." She pulled a blanket from the chest in the corner and tossed it to him. "You can sleep there by the hearth. I'll be in my room. And Jared, if you snore, you're going back to the barn." He laughed, a real laugh that lit up his whole face. "Fair enough." She retreated to her small bedroom, closing the door behind her, and lay awake for a long time, listening to him settle down by the fire. It felt strange having someone else in her space after so many years alone. Strange, but not bad. Not bad at all. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The rain washed away and leaving everything fresh and clean. Brenna woke to the smell of cooking, which was so unexpected that she lay there for a moment thinking she must still be dreaming. She dressed quickly and emerged from her room to find Jared at her stove, frying eggs and some kind of meat. He had clearly been through her stores. "I hope you don't mind," he said, glancing over his shoulder at her. "I figured I should make myself useful. Besides, you fed me last night. It's only fair I return the favor." "Where did you get bacon?" she asked, recognizing the smell now. "I had some in my saddlebags. I wasn't sure how long it would take to convince you to talk to me, so I came prepared." He plated the food and brought it to the table. "It's not fancy, but it's edible." They ate together in a silence that was less awkward than the night before, but still careful, like two people learning to be around each other again. "What do you usually do in the mornings?" Jared asked as he helped her clean up. "Tend the garden, feed the animals, check my snares if I set any. Gather herbs if I need to replenish my stock," she shrugged. "It varies." "Can I help?" She considered him. He was still dressed in his fine traveling clothes, not exactly suited for farm work. "You'll get dirty." "I don't mind. I've gotten soft living in town. A little honest work will do me good." So she set him to work weeding the garden while she harvested some early carrots and checked on the beans climbing their poles. It was companionable, working side by side in the morning sun, and she found herself relaxing despite her determination to keep her guard up. "You've got a good setup here," Jared said, sitting back on his heels and surveying the neat rows. "Better than I remember." "I've had 7 years to improve it," she said, unable to keep the edge from her voice entirely. He winced but did not argue. Fair point. They worked until midday when the sun grew too hot and they retreated to the shade of the cottage. Brenna made a simple lunch of bread and cheese and the carrots they had harvested, and they sat on the bench outside her door, eating and watching the chickens scratch in the yard. "Tell me more about Greystone," Brenna said. "What's it really like? Don't just tell me the good parts." Jared thought for a moment, chewing slowly. "It's rough around the edges," he said finally. "It's a frontier town, so there's a lot of hard drinking and fighting on Saturday nights. The law is present but stretched thin, so people mostly police themselves, which works better than you'd think. The winters are harsh, colder than here, and the summers can be brutal. There are still bandits in the hills, and sometimes things come out of the deep woods that are worse than bandits." "Sounds charming," she said dryly. He smiled. "But the people are genuine. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. If they accept you, they really accept you, not just tolerate you. And there's opportunity there for people willing to work for it. It's not easy, but it's honest. And the orcs there, they're really accepted, more or less. There's still prejudice, I won't lie to you, but it's not like some places where orcs get run out of town or worse. There are orc families there, orc businesses. The blacksmith is an orc, and he's the best in 3 counties. People respect skill and hard work more than bloodline." Brenna absorbed this, trying to imagine herself in such a place. Would they accept an orc married to a human? Some would. Some wouldn't. But enough would that we could build a life there, have friends, be part of a community. He looked at her seriously. "I won't pretend it would be perfect, Brenna. There would be challenges, but we'd face them together, and that makes all the difference." "You make it sound simple," she said. "It's not simple, it's terrifying. But the alternative is staying apart, and I've tried that for 7 years and it nearly killed me." His voice was raw with honesty. "Every day without you was like missing a limb. I functioned, I worked, I even laughed sometimes. But there was always this hollow place inside me that nothing could fill." She looked down at her hands, her green fingers calloused from work. "You hurt me," she said quietly. "When you left without asking me to come, without even discussing it, you made me feel like I didn't matter. Like my feelings, my choices were irrelevant." "I know," he said miserably. "And I hate myself for it. I was trying to protect you, trying to be noble, but really I was just being a coward. I was scared of failing you, scared of what people would say, scared of everything. And I let that fear make my decisions instead of trusting in us." "How do I know you won't do it again?" she asked, finally voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. "How do I know that when things get hard, you won't make another decision for both of us without consulting me?" He set down his plate and turned to face her fully. "You don't know," he said. "I can make promises, I can swear on anything you want, but in the end you just have to decide if you trust me. And I know I haven't given you much reason to. But I can tell you this, I learned my lesson. The hardest 7 years of my life taught me that protecting someone by pushing them away is just another form of cruelty. If you give me another chance, I swear I will talk to you, listen to you, include you in every decision that affects us both. No more noble sacrifices, no more deciding what's best for you without asking you. We'll be partners in every sense of the word, or not at all." Brenna searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity, any hint that he was just saying what she wanted to hear. but all she saw was earnest determination and a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "I want to believe you," she said. "Then believe me," he said simply. "Give me the chance to prove it." The days fell into a rhythm after that. Jared worked alongside her, proving himself surprisingly handy with repairs and heavy labor. He fixed the sagging gate on the chicken coop, reinforced the barn door, and re-thatched a section of the cottage roof that had been leaking. In the evenings, they talked, really talked, sharing the stories of the 7 years they had spent apart. He told her about the Iron Hills, about the wild beauty of the mountains and the rough camaraderie of the miners. He told her about the first time he had faced down a bandit raid, how terrified he had been, and how he had discovered a talent for leadership he had not known he possessed. He told her about the investments he had made, the risks he had taken, the slow building of his fortune. She told him about the hard winters when she had nearly run out of food, the times when hunters had come too close to her cottage and she had hidden, afraid of what they might do if they found an orc woman living alone. She told him about the animals she had saved and the ones she had not been able to save. She told him about the loneliness that had become so familiar she almost did not notice it anymore, except on nights when the silence pressed too heavy, and she remembered what it had been like to have someone to talk to. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," Jared said one evening as they sat by the fire, the words inadequate but sincere. "I'm sorry too," Brenna said, "for both of us." 3 weeks into his stay, they had their first real argument. It started over something small, Jared suggesting that she was working too hard and should let him handle more of the heavy labor. "I've been managing fine on my own for 7 years, Brenna snapped. "I don't need you to swoop in and rescue me." "I'm not trying to rescue you," Jared shot back. "I'm trying to help. There's a difference." "Is there? Because it feels a lot like you think I'm some fragile thing that needs protecting." "That's not what I think at all. I know you're strong, Brenna. I know you're capable. But that doesn't mean you have to do everything alone, especially when I'm right here willing to help." "And what happens when you leave again?" The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "What happens when I get used to having help and then you decide you need to go make your fortune somewhere else?" Jared's face went pale. "I'm not leaving. I told you I'm here for as long as you'll have me." "You said that before," she said, and her voice was shaking now. "7 years ago you said you loved me, and then you left." "I know I did." He stood cross to her, took her hands in his even though she tried to pull away. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Brenna, I swear to you I am not that scared boy anymore. I came back because I can't live without you. I won't live without you. Even if you tell me no, even if you send me away, I'll stay in the area, I'll check on you, I'll be here if you need me. You couldn't get rid of me if you tried." "That's not fair," she said, tears pricking at her eyes. "You can't just decide these things." "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry, I'm doing it again, aren't I, making decisions without asking you what you want." He took a breath, visibly calming himself. "What do you want, Brenna? Do you want me to back off, give you more space? Do you want me to leave?" "Tell me and I'll do it." She looked at him, at his earnest face and his hands holding hers, and suddenly the anger drained out of her. "I don't want you to leave," she admitted. "I'm just scared." "So am I," he said softly. "I'm terrified. Terrified that you'll say no, terrified that I've already blown my chance, terrified that I'll mess this up somehow. But I'd rather be here, scared and hopeful, than anywhere else in the world." She let him pull her into his arms then, and they stood there in the middle of her small cottage, holding each other while the fire crackled and the evening shadows lengthened around them. After that, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had been maintaining began to erode, replaced by a growing comfort and familiarity. They fell into old patterns, finishing each other's sentences, moving around each other in the small space with an unconscious coordination that spoke of deep compatibility. One evening, Brenna was grinding herbs for a salve when her mortar slipped and shattered on the floor, scattering chamomile and lavender across the boards. She swore in Orcish, a harsh guttural sound, and Jared looked up from the harness he was mending. "Are you all right?" he asked, already moving to help. "Fine, just clumsy," she muttered, kneeling to gather the scattered herbs. He knelt beside her, picking up shards of the broken mortar. "This was your good one, wasn't it?" "It was my only one," she said, more sharply than she intended. "I'll have to go into town to buy another, which means dealing with people who'd rather spit on me than sell to me." "I'll go," Jared offered immediately. "You don't know what I need, so tell me. Write it down if you want, or better yet, we'll go together." She looked at him skeptically. "You want to go into town with an orc. You know what people will say, what they'll think." "Let them say and think whatever they want," he said firmly. "I'm not ashamed of you, Brenna. I never was. I'm only ashamed of myself for not being brave enough to show it 7 years ago." So 2 days later, they rode into the nearest settlement together, a rough collection of buildings called Sutter's Creek that served the scattered homesteads in the area. Brenna rode her old plow horse, a stolid mare who was too sensible to spook at much, while Jared rode his roan. The stares started as soon as they entered the main street. Brenna was used to them, had learned to hold her head high and ignore the whispers, but she could feel Jared tense beside her, his jaw clenching. "Ignore them," she murmured. "How can you stand it?" he muttered back. "Practice," she said dryly. They tied their horses outside the general store, and Brenna steeled herself for the confrontation that inevitably came with trying to do business in a human town. But before she could enter, Jared caught her hand. "Together," he said simply. She nodded, and they walked in side by side. The shopkeeper, a dour man named Silas who had always treated her with barely concealed contempt, looked up from his counter. His eyes widened when he saw Jared beside her. "Help you?" he asked, his tone marginally more polite than usual. "We need a mortar and pestle," Jared said before Brenna could speak. "A good one, stone if you have it." Silas's eyes flicked between them, clearly trying to work out their relationship. "I've got a few," he said slowly. "Let me get them." He disappeared into the back, and Brenna let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "See," Jared murmured. "Not so bad. Wait for it," she said. Sure enough, when Silas returned with 3 different mortars, he addressed all his comments to Jared, as if Brenna was not even there. "This one's limestone, good for general use. This one's granite, heavier but more durable. And this one's marble, finest I've got but pricey." "Which one do you want?" Jared asked Brenna, deliberately drawing her into the conversation. She examined each one, testing the weight and the smoothness of the bowl. "The granite," she said finally. "It'll last longest." "The granite it is," Jared said to Silas. "How much?" The price Silas named was highway robbery, at least double what the mortar was worth, but Brenna had expected as much. What she had not expected was for Jared to laugh. "You're joking," he said. "I've bought granite mortars in Greystone for half that price. Try again." Silas's face reddened. "That's my price." "Then we'll take our business elsewhere," Jared said pleasantly, taking Brenna's arm and turning toward the door. "Wait," Silas said, and there was a note of desperation in his voice. "Business must be slow." "I could come down a bit, say 15 silver." 10, Jared countered. 12, and that's my final offer." "Done." Jared counted out the coins and took the mortar, handing it to Brenna with a small bow. "My lady." She could not help it, she laughed. It was such an absurd gesture in the middle of a grimy general store, but it was also perfect, treating her with a courtly respect that made Silas's contempt look petty and small. They walked out together, and Brenna was surprised to realize she was smiling. "That was something," she said as they loaded the mortar into her saddlebag. "That was me finally standing up for what matters," Jared said. 7 years too late, but better late than never." On the ride back, Brenna found herself thinking about what it might be like to have Jared beside her all the time, not just for a month or two, but permanently. To face the world together instead of alone. It was a seductive thought, dangerous in its appeal. That night after dinner, Jared pulled out the ring box again. He had been carrying it with him everywhere, she realized, keeping it close. "I'm not asking again," he said quickly when he saw her tense. I wanted you to look at it properly. I spent a long time choosing it." He opened the box, and she looked at the ring more carefully than she had that first rain-soaked night. It was beautifully made, the gold worked in a pattern of leaves and vines, the green stone set in the center like a flower. "An emerald?" she asked. "Jade," he corrected. "I thought it matched your eyes, and it's supposed to bring harmony and balance according to the jeweler. Seemed appropriate for us trying to find our balance again." She reached out and touched it lightly, not taking it from the box. "It's beautiful." "So are you," he said softly. She pulled her hand back, suddenly overwhelmed. "Jared, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know I put thought into it, that this isn't some impulsive gesture. I planned for this, dreamed of this for years." "That's a lot of pressure," she said, trying to make light of it. "I don't mean it to be. I just want you to understand that this is real for me. You're real for me. The realest thing in my life." She looked at him, at his open, honest face, and felt something crack inside her chest, some last wall she had been holding on to. "Come here," she said. He moved closer, and she reached up and cupped his face in her green hands, feeling the scratch of his stubble against her palms. "I'm not ready to say yes yet," she said, "but I'm getting there. You should know that I'm getting there." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." She kissed him then, the first time in 7 years, and it was sweet and tentative and full of all the things they had not said. He kissed her back carefully, as if she was something precious that might break, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I've missed you," she whispered. "I've missed you too," he said, "every single day." They sat by the fire late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, and when they finally went to their separate sleeping places, Brenna lay awake, her fingers touching her lips where he had kissed her, and let herself hope. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and conversation, and slow, careful healing. They fell into domesticity with an ease that sometimes surprised Brenna. Jared was good company, quick with a joke when she was tired, comfortable with silence when she needed quiet, always willing to lend a hand without being asked. She found herself watching him sometimes when he did not know she was looking. The way he moved, economical and sure. The way he talked to the animals, gentle and patient. The way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, as if she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. One morning, about 6 weeks into his stay, Brenna woke to find him already up and gone. His blankets by the fire were neatly folded, but there was no sign of him. A brief flutter of panic went through her. Is this it? Has he left again? Before she squashed it down. His horse was still in the barn. His belongings were still here. He had just gone for a walk or something. She went about her morning routine, trying not to worry, but by the time the sun was fully up and he still had not returned, she was starting to genuinely fret. She was just about to go looking for him when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Jared rode into the yard, and he was not alone. Behind him, tied together in a rough string, were 3 more horses loaded with supplies. "What is all this?" Brenna asked as he dismounted. "Supplies," he said, grinning. I rode to Sutter's Creek at first light. We were running low on flour and salt, and I noticed your winter stores are pretty depleted. I figured I'd stock us up. Stock us up, she repeated, focusing on the plural. His grin faded slightly, uncertainty creeping in. I'm sorry, I should have asked first. I just thought, well, if you're going to decide soon, and if you decide yes, we'll be leaving for Greystone and you'll want to leave your place properly stocked in case you ever want to come back. And if you decide no, well, at least you'll have supplies for the winter. And if I decide no, you'll have wasted a lot of money on supplies for a place you won't be living in, she pointed out. It's not wasted if it helps you, he said simply. She looked at the loaded horses, at the thought and care he had put into choosing things she would need, and felt that crack in her chest widen a little more. Help me unload, she said. They worked together to carry the supplies into the cottage and the barn. He had bought flour and salt, like he said, but also sugar and tea and coffee, luxuries she rarely indulged in. There were new tools, a better axe and a saw with sharp teeth. There were blankets and candles and a whole bolt of good cloth. There were seeds for the garden, varieties she had mentioned wanting to try but never bothered to order. Jared, this is too much, she said as they stacked the last of it. It's not enough, he countered. It'll never be enough to make up for the 7 years I left you struggling alone. But it's a start. She turned to him, this man who had left her and come back, who had spent 7 years building a future he hoped she would share, who looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. I have my answer, she said. He froze, his whole body going still. You do? Yes. She took a breath, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump. Ask me again. Properly this time. His hands were shaking as he pulled the ring box from his pocket. He dropped to one knee right there in the barn, amid the hay and the dust and the smell of horses, and looked up at her with his heart in his eyes. Brenna Thorne, he said, and his voice shook too. I love you. I've loved you since I was a stupid young soldier who didn't know how to handle what he felt. I loved you when I left. I loved you every day I was gone, and I'll love you until the day I die, and probably after that too, if the priests are right about there being something beyond. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, but I swear on everything I hold sacred that I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice in giving me another chance. Will you marry me? Will you come to Greystone and build a life with me? Will you let me spend the rest of my days making you happy? Brenna felt tears running down her green cheeks, but she was smiling through them. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it, yes. His whoop of joy startled the horses. He surged to his feet and swung her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and it fit perfectly, the jade glowing against her green skin like it had been made for her. I can't believe you said yes, he breathed, staring at her like she might disappear. I can't believe I'm saying this, but neither can I, she said, laughing. When did I get so foolish? Not foolish. Brave. He kissed her, deep and thorough, a promise and a celebration all at once. The bravest woman I know. They decided to marry before leaving for Greystone, wanting to start their journey as husband and wife. The question was where and how. Neither of them belonged to any church, and the priests in Sutter's Creek were unlikely to perform a ceremony for a human orc couple even if they asked. There's a circuit judge who comes through sometimes, Jared said as they discussed it over dinner. He's known for being fair-minded. We could wait for him. When does he come through? Not for another 2 months, usually. Brenna shook her head. I don't want to wait that long. 7 years was enough waiting. Then what do you suggest? She thought for a moment. What if we married ourselves? In the old way, I mean. An orc hand-fasting, just the two of us and our vows to each other. It wouldn't be legal in human terms, but it would be real. Teach me, Jared said immediately. Tell me what to do. So Brenna taught him the old orc traditions, the ones her mother had taught her before she died. They would need to fast for a day to clear their minds and spirits. They would need to exchange tokens, something of personal value. They would need to make their vows at sunrise as the world woke to a new day. They chose a date a week away, giving them time to prepare. Brenna worked on her token for Jared, a small carved figure of a horse, its mane flowing. She was not much of a woodcarver, but she put all her care into it, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with oil until it glowed. Jared disappeared for a whole day and came back with his hands wrapped in bandages. "What did you do?" Brenna demanded, unwrapping them to find his palms covered in small cuts and blisters. "I made your token," he said, and pulled out a necklace. He had made it from copper wire, twisted and woven into the shape of a tree, its branches spreading wide. Hanging from the branches were small pieces of green glass he had somehow managed to shape into leaves. "It's supposed to be the tree you have out front," he explained. "The one you said you planted when you first built this place. I thought it's been here through everything, through the 7 years I was gone watching over you. It seemed right." She put it on immediately, feeling the weight of it against her chest, warm from his hands. "It's perfect," she whispered. The night before their wedding, they sat up late, both too excited to sleep. "Are you nervous?" Brenna asked. "Terrified," Jared admitted. "Not about marrying you, that's the easiest decision I've ever made, but about everything after, about being good enough, being the husband you deserve." "You don't have to be perfect," she said gently. "You just have to be you, the real you, flaws and all. That's who I'm choosing." "Lucky for me he's not too terrible then," Jared said, trying to joke, but she could hear the genuine fear underneath. "Hey," she said, taking his hand. "I'm scared too. Scared of leaving this place, scared of starting over somewhere new, scared that I'll wake up one day and this will all have been a dream. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe and alone. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," he said, squeezing her hand. They stayed up until the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, then went to prepare. The ceremony required them to bathe separately, to dress in clean clothes, to approach their vows as new people, leaving behind who they had been. Brenna put on her best dress, a simple green thing that she had made herself. She braided her black hair with wildflowers she had picked the day before. She looked at herself in her small, cracked mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked happy. When had that happened? Jared was waiting for her under the big tree in front of her cottage, dressed in a clean white shirt and dark trousers. His hair was still damp from washing and he had shaved. He looked young and nervous and so handsome it made her heart hurt. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached. "So do you," she said, and he laughed, the tension breaking slightly. They stood facing each other as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Brenna took his hands, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers. "I don't have fancy words," she said. "I'm not a poet or a scholar, but I can tell you this. 7 years ago you left and I thought my heart would never heal. I told myself I was fine alone, that I didn't need anyone, but I was lying to myself. I've been half alive for 7 years, just going through the motions. And then you came back, and suddenly I could breathe again. I don't know what the future holds, Jared Quinlan. I don't know if Greystone will be everything you promise or if we'll face hardships I can't even imagine. But I know that I want to face it with you. I choose you today and every day after for as long as we both live." Jared's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm not good with words either," he said, his voice rough, "but I'll try. Brenna Thorne, you are the strongest, kindest, most amazing person I've ever met. 7 years ago, I was a coward who ran away from the best thing that ever happened to him. I've regretted it every day since. But somehow, impossibly, you're giving me another chance. I don't deserve it, but I'm going to earn it. I promise you, I will wake up every day and choose to be the man you deserve. I will listen to you, respect you, stand beside you in everything. I will love you when it's easy and when it's hard, when we're happy and when we fight, when we're young and when we're old. I choose you, Brenna, with all my heart, today and always. She gave him the carved horse, and he gave her the copper tree, and they tied their wrists together with a strip of cloth, binding them as the sun rose fully, warming their faces. In the sight of the earth and sky, Brenna said, speaking the traditional words, we are bound. 2 lives becoming one journey, 2 hearts beating as one. What we have joined, let no one separate. What we have joined, let no one separate, Jared repeated. They kissed as husband and wife, and the sun seemed to shine just for them, blessing their union with golden light. The next weeks were a flurry of preparation for the journey to Greystone. They sorted through Brenna's belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave. She said goodbye to the cottage that had been her home for 7 years, feeling bittersweet about leaving but excited for what came next. They loaded her most precious possessions onto a small wagon Jared had bought, along with supplies for the journey. The rest they left, the cottage closed up but not abandoned. In case we ever want to come back, Jared said, and Brenna loved him a little more for understanding that she might need that option. The journey north took 3 weeks, following rough roads and game trails through country that grew wilder and more beautiful as they went. They camped under the stars, talking late into the night. They crossed rivers and climbed hills, and through it all, Jared was patient and cheerful, never pushing her too hard, always ready to help when she needed it. They stopped in small towns along the way, and Brenna began to notice something. The farther north they went, the less hostility she encountered. People still stared. Orcs were unusual enough anywhere to draw attention, but there was less hatred in it, more curiosity than contempt. This is what I meant, Jared said quietly one evening as they made camp. It's different up here. Not perfect, but different. Greystone appeared on the horizon on a bright autumn morning, and Brenna's first thought was that it was bigger than she had expected. It was not a city, not by any means, but it was substantial. A proper town with actual streets and buildings of stone and wood. As they rode in, people called greetings to Jared, clearly recognizing him. Some stared openly at Brenna, but several smiled and nodded. An orc woman sweeping the steps of a bakery waved, and Brenna waved back, feeling a flutter of hope. "Welcome home," Jared said softly and squeezed her hand. The house was everything he had promised and more. 2 stories of solid timber with real glass windows and a stone chimney. The garden was indeed pathetic, overgrown with weeds, but she could see the bones of it, the potential. "What do you think?" Jared asked anxiously as she walked through the rooms, taking it all in. "I think it's wonderful," she said honestly. "I think it's the most wonderful thing I've ever seen." He showed her everything, the big kitchen with its eastern window, the bedrooms upstairs, the barn and the land beyond. It was more space than she had ever dreamed of having, more opportunity than she had ever imagined. "You really built all this for us?" she asked, standing in the middle of the main room. "Every board," he confirmed. "Well, I had help with the framing, but I did most of it myself. I kept thinking about you, about what you would like, what would make you happy." She pulled him close and kissed him. "You make me happy," she said. "This is just icing on top." They settled into life in Greystone with surprising ease. The neighbors were curious but mostly friendly. An older human woman named Martha brought over a pie the day after they arrived, welcoming them officially and not even blinking at Brenna's green skin. My son married a dwarf woman, Martha said matter-of-factly. Love is love, I always say. Skin color doesn't change the heart beneath it. The orc blacksmith, a burly man named Grak, came by a few days later. Heard there was another orc in town, he said to Brenna in the orcish language, which she had not heard anyone else speak in years. Wanted to introduce myself. If you need anything, my forge is on High Street. Brenna found herself with friends for the first time in longer than she could remember. Martha introduced her to a sewing circle, a mixed group of human, orc, and dwarf women who met weekly. They were loud and funny and welcoming, and Brenna found herself laughing more than she had in years. Jared reopened his business connections, consulting for the mines and investing in new ventures. He was good at it, she realized, watching him negotiate a deal with a merchant consortium. He had a head for numbers and a talent for reading people. But more than that, he was good at being a husband. He kept his promise to include her in decisions, asking her opinion on everything from business investments to what color to paint the bedroom. He listened when she talked, remembered small things she mentioned in passing, surprised her with wildflowers from the market because he knew she liked them. They had their first real fight about 3 months after arriving in Greystone. It was over something stupid, whether to buy new chickens or wait until spring. But it escalated, both of them saying things they did not quite mean, until Brenna found herself shouting and Jared shouting back. And then he stopped, right in the middle of an angry sentence, and said, "Wait, what are we doing? This is stupid." "You're stupid," she shot back, but her heart was not in it anymore. "I am," he agreed. "I'm being an idiot. Can we start over?" They talked it out, really talked, listening to each other's actual concerns instead of just defending their positions. They compromised, deciding to buy 2 chickens now and more in spring. It was not the decision that mattered but the process, the way they worked through conflict instead of letting it fester. "We're going to fight sometimes," Jared said that night as they lay in bed. "We're 2 stubborn people with strong opinions, but we can fight fair and still love each other." "Right, right," Brenna agreed, curling into his warmth. "As long as we always come back to this, to us." Winter came to Greystone with a vengeance, snow piling up high and the temperature dropping until Brenna's breath frosted in the air. But the house was warm and tight, and Jared had laid in plenty of firewood. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and just being together. Brenna started a healing practice, word spreading quickly that there was an orc healer in town who knew her business. She treated everything from childhood fevers to broken bones, and people paid her fairly, respecting her skill. One evening in early spring, as the snow was finally melting and the first green shoots were pushing up through the earth, Brenna realized she was late. She did the calculations twice, then a third time, but there was no mistake. "Jared," she said that night over dinner, "I think I'm pregnant." He dropped his fork. "You think or you know, I'm pretty sure. I'll know for certain in a few more weeks, but all the signs are there." He was around the table in a heartbeat, pulling her up into his arms, spinning her just like he had in the barn when she had agreed to marry him. "We're going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "A baby, Brenna." "Maybe," she cautioned. "It's early yet. A lot can happen." "But maybe," he insisted, his hand going to her still flat stomach. "Maybe we're going to be parents." She was right. The pregnancy progressed normally, and by midsummer there was no hiding her swelling belly. Jared was insufferably attentive, worrying over every little thing until she wanted to throttle him. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she said for the 100th time when he tried to stop her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I know, but what if?" "No what ifs. I'm fine. The baby is fine. You need to relax before you drive both of us mad." But she loved him for it, for his concern and his excitement. He talked to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories and making promises about the future. "Your mother is the strongest, bravest person in the world," he would say. "And you're going to be just like her. Strong and brave and probably way too stubborn for your poor old father to handle. Our child is going to be spoiled rotten if you keep this up," Brenna said, but she was smiling. Labor came on a crisp autumn morning, almost exactly a year after they had arrived in Greystone. It was long and hard, but Martha was there, and an orc midwife named Zerka, both of them experienced and calm. Jared paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal until Brenna, in between contractions, yelled for him to come in. "If I have to suffer through this, you're suffering with me," she growled, and he took her hand and did not leave her side. Their son was born as the sun set, his first cry strong and indignant. He was beautiful with Jared's gray eyes and Brenna's green skin, a perfect blend of both of them. "He's perfect," Jared breathed, cradling the tiny bundle. "Brenna, he's perfect." "Of course he is," she said tiredly. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, but now, looking at their son, only one felt right. "Aiden," Jared said. "It means fire. For the fire in you that kept burning even when I left and the fire that brought me back." "Aiden Quinlan," Brenna tested the name. "I like it." Aiden was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had his father's temperament, cheerful and easygoing, which was lucky because Brenna was pretty sure she could not have handled a fussy infant on top of everything else. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and more chaotic, but full in a way it had never been before. Jared balanced work and family, always making time for both. Brenna continued her healing practice, with Martha or one of the other women watching Aiden when she had patience. When Aiden was 6 months old, Jared came home with news. "I've been offered a position on the town council," he said. "They want me to represent the business interests. It would mean more time commitment, more meetings, but also more influence. I could make sure policies are fair for everyone, including orcs and other non-humans." "Do you want to do it?" Brenna asked. "I think so, but it affects both of us, so I wanted to ask you first. What do you think?" She thought about it, about the man he had become, the leader she had seen glimpses of. "I think you'd be good at it," she said, "and I think you should do it. Just don't let it consume you. We need you too." "You and Aiden will always come first," he promised. "Always." He took the position and threw himself into it with characteristic dedication. He pushed for fair housing policies, for protections for non-human residents, for investments in infrastructure that benefited everyone. He made enemies among the more conservative faction, but he also made things better, tangibly and measurably. Brenna watched him grow into his role, proud of the man he had become. The scared boy who had ridden away 7 years ago was gone completely, replaced by someone confident and capable and kind. On their second wedding anniversary, they went back to the cottage in the woods for a visit, leaving Aiden with Martha. The cottage was dusty but intact, and they spent the afternoon cleaning and airing it out. "Do you miss it?" Jared asked as they sat on the bench outside watching the sunset. "Sometimes," Brenna admitted. "I miss the quiet, the simplicity, but I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything." "No regrets," she turned to look at him. "About marrying you, not a single one. My only regret is the 7 years I wasted," he said. "Everything since you said yes has been the best time of my life." They stayed the night in the cottage, making love in the small bed where they had first been together, feeling like they were blessing the space that had brought them together. In the morning, they rode back to Greystone, to their real home, to their son and their life. The cottage would always be there, a reminder of where they had started, but Greystone was where they belonged now. 2 years later, Brenna gave birth to a daughter. Phoebe came into the world screaming at the top of her lungs and did not stop for what felt like weeks. She was colicky and demanding and utterly exhausting. "I think she's punishing us for how easy Aiden was," Jared said blearily one night as he walked the floor with her, trying to get her to sleep. But she was also beautiful, with Brenna's dark hair and a dimple in one green cheek that appeared when she finally smiled at 3 months old. Aiden, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help. "Gentle," Brenna would remind him as he stroked her soft hair. "Be gentle with baby Phoebe." Life was full and loud and sometimes overwhelming, but it was good. So good that sometimes Brenna had to stop and remind herself that this was real, that she had not imagined it. On Aiden's 4th birthday, they threw a party in their big yard, inviting all the neighborhood children and their parents. It was a mix of humans, orcs, dwarves, even a few elf children from the outskirts of town. The children played together without care for who was what, and the adults talked and laughed and shared food. "This is what I wanted," Jared said quietly, watching Aiden lead a game of tag that involved at least a dozen children of various species. "This is what I dreamed of when I was building the house. A place where our children could just be children, where they didn't have to worry about being accepted." "You built something good here," Brenna said, leaning into him. "We built something good." "We did," he agreed and kissed the top of her head. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, they sat on their porch in the gathering dusk, holding hands and watching the stars come out. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't come back?" Jared asked. "Sometimes," Brenna admitted. "I think I would have survived. I'm good at surviving, but I wouldn't have lived, not really, not like this." "I wouldn't have either," he said. "I would have made money, built businesses, maybe even been successful by most measures. But I would have been hollow inside. You're what makes everything worth it, Brenna. You and our children, you're my home." "And you're mine," she said simply. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night settling around them like a blanket. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Closer, crickets sang in the grass, the sounds of a living town, a place where they belonged. "7 years," Brenna said softly. 7 years you were gone, and now it feels like you never left at all." "I'll never leave again," Jared promised. "Wherever you are, that's where I am." "For the rest of our lives." "For the rest of our lives," Brenna echoed and knew it was true. The years that followed were not always easy. There were hardships and struggles, setbacks and sorrows. Phoebe went through a phase of climbing everything and giving them both heart attacks on a regular basis. Aiden broke his arm falling out of a tree and had to be confined to the house for weeks, driving everyone mad with his restless energy. Jared's business ventures did not always succeed. There was a bad investment that cost them a significant amount of money and forced them to tighten their belts for a year. Brenna lost patience sometimes, people she could not save despite her best efforts, and the grief of those losses never got easier. But through all of it, they had each other. When Jared was stressed about money, Brenna reminded him of what really mattered. When Brenna was exhausted from a difficult birth or a patient who had died, Jared held her while she cried and told her she was doing her best, that she could not save everyone, but that did not diminish the many lives she had saved. They taught their children to be kind, to judge people by their character, not their race, to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. They taught them about the world's complexity, about the prejudice that still existed, but also about the good people working to make things better. Aiden grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books and learning. Phoebe was wild and fearless, always the first to climb the highest tree or jump in the coldest stream. They were different in temperament but close as siblings, looking out for each other in the way that made Brenna's heart full. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jared surprised Brenna with a trip, just the two of them, back to the cottage in the woods. Martha agreed to watch the children, and they rode south together on a beautiful summer morning. The cottage looked smaller than Brenna remembered, but still sound. They had been back a few times over the years to check on it, to maintain it, but this time felt different. This time they were not just visiting the past but honoring it. 10 years, Jared said as they stood under the big tree where they had married themselves. A decade since you gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You earned it, Brenna said. Every day since, you've earned it. They spent the weekend there, just the two of them, talking and laughing and remembering. They walked the paths Brenna used to walk alone, and she told him stories of those 7 years when she had lived here without him. I was so lonely, she said. I didn't even realize how lonely until you came back and reminded me what it was like to have someone to talk to. I was lonely too, he said. Surrounded by people in the Iron Hills, but utterly alone because the one person I wanted to talk to was hundreds of miles away. We were both idiots, Brenna said. Absolutely, Jared agreed, but we figured it out eventually. On their last night at the cottage, they lay in bed with the window open, listening to the night sounds of the forest. I'm glad we kept this place, Brenna said. I'm glad we have Greystone, our house, our life there, but I'm glad this is still here too. It feels important somehow. It is important, Jared said. It's where we found each other, where we lost each other and where we found each other again. That deserves to be honored. They rode back to Greystone the next day, back to their children and their responsibilities, but carrying with them a renewed appreciation for the journey they had taken together. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual milestones and moments. Aiden started formal schooling and excelled. Phoebe resisted all attempts at formal education, until they found her a teacher who let her learn by doing, by exploring, by moving. Jared became a fixture on the town council, known for his fairness and his willingness to fight for what was right. Brenna's reputation as a healer spread, and people came from neighboring towns seeking her care. They grew older together, the lines on their faces deepening, their hair gaining streaks of gray. But their love did not diminish. If anything, it deepened, enriched by years of partnership and trust. When Aiden turned 16, tall and serious and thoughtful, he came to them with an announcement. I want to go to university, he said. There's one in the capital that accepts all races. They have a program in natural philosophy that sounds fascinating. Brenna's heart clenched. Her baby leaving. But she looked at Jared and saw the same bittersweet pride in his eyes. Then you should go, Jared said. We'll figure out the finances. Education is always worth investing in. They sent him off with tears and hugs and promises to write. The house felt too quiet without him, but they were proud. So proud of the young man he had become. Phoebe, 14 and fierce, declared she had no intention of ever leaving. I'm going to be a ranger, she announced. Protect the frontier from bandits and monsters. I don't need a university for that. Brenna did not know whether to laugh or cry. Her daughter, so brave and so reckless. You need training at least, she said. Proper training from someone who knows what they're doing. They found her an apprenticeship with a retired ranger, a grizzled orc woman named Korth who had 30 years of experience and no patience for foolishness. If anyone could teach Phoebe discipline, it was her. Life moved on, the rhythm of it familiar and comforting. Letters came from Aiden, full of excitement about his studies and the friends he was making. Phoebe came home dirty and exhausted from her training, but glowing with satisfaction. Jared and Brenna found themselves alone together more often, the house quiet in a way it had not been in years. Remember when we couldn't find 5 minutes of peace? Brenna said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. I miss it, Jared admitted. "The chaos, the noise, but I also like this, just us like it was in the beginning." "Like it was at the cottage," Brenna said. "Exactly." They were not old yet, not really, but they were thinking about the future differently now. Planning for when they would slow down, when they would hand over responsibilities to the next generation. "I want to spend more time traveling," Jared said. "Seeing places we never got to see when we were busy raising children." "I want a bigger garden," Brenna said, "and more time to experiment with new herbs and remedies." "We can do both," Jared said. "We have time. Years and years, if we're lucky." They were lucky. The years were kind to them. They traveled some, visiting the capital to see Aiden graduate from university with honors. They took a trip to the coast, seeing the ocean for the first time, Brenna laughing as waves crashed over her feet. Phoebe completed her ranger training and was assigned to a post on the frontier, protecting settlements from the dangers of the wild lands. She visited when she could, always with new stories and new scars. Aiden returned to Greystone after university, taking a position as a teacher at the local school. He married a human woman named Sarah, and they had children of their own, 2 boys who were as different as night and day but clearly adored each other. Brenna and Jared became grandparents, spoiling their grandsons shamelessly in the way grandparents do. They taught them to fish in the stream behind the house, told them stories of the old days, made them cookies, and let them stay up past bedtime. "We're old," Jared said one day, watching their grandsons play in the yard while Aiden and Sarah sat nearby. "Speak for yourself," Brenna said, but she was smiling. They were older, that was true. Gray-haired and slower moving than they once were, but they were happy. So deeply, contentedly happy. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their friends and family threw them a huge celebration. The whole town seemed to turn out, filling their yard and spilling out into the street. There were speeches and toasts, food and music, and the joyful chaos of dozens of people celebrating 2 people who had somehow made their unlikely love work. 25 years, the mayor said, raising his glass. Since an orc woman and a human man decided to build a life together, right here in Greystone. They've raised good children, contributed to this community in countless ways, and shown all of us what love and commitment really look like. To Brenna and Jared. To Brenna and Jared. The crowd echoed and Brenna felt tears prick her eyes. "You okay?" Jared murmured, squeezing her hand. "More than okay," she whispered back. "This is everything I never knew I wanted." That night, after the guests had gone and the children and grandchildren had returned to their own homes, Brenna and Jared sat on their porch in their usual spot, holding hands and watching the stars. "You remember that night I came back?" Jared asked. 25 years and about 7 months ago, I stood at your door in the rain with a ring in my pocket, terrified you'd send me away." "I remember," Brenna said. "I cried all over your shirt. Best tears I ever caused," he said, and she laughed. "I was so scared," she admitted. "Scared to trust you again, scared to hope, but I did it anyway, and look where we ended up. Here," Jared said simply, "together, with a family and a home and a life worth living." "Would you change anything?" Brenna asked. "If you could go back, would you do anything differently?" He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I wouldn't leave you in the first place," he said finally. "I'd save us both those 7 years of loneliness, but everything after you said yes, everything we've built together, I wouldn't change a moment of it. Not even Phoebe's climbing phase." Brenna teased. "Not even that," he said firmly. "Every moment, good and bad, brought us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and complete. 25 years of marriage, and they still had things to say to each other, but sometimes the silence was just as good. "I love you," Brenna said softly. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you so much it still surprises me sometimes." "I love you too," Jared said. "Every day, all over again. You're the best decision I ever made, Brenna Quinlan. Even beating out investing in that mine," she asked. "Even that," he said seriously. "The mine made me money, you made me whole." The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging, bearing witness to their love. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Closer, their grandson's laughter echoed from inside where they were spending the night. This was their life. Hard-won and deeply cherished, built on a foundation of forgiveness and trust, strengthened by years of partnership and love. From a rainy night 7 years after he rode away to this moment, 25 years married and still holding hands on a porch under the stars. "Here's to the next 25, Jared said, raising an invisible glass. "And the 25 after that," Brenna added. "And all the years after, however many we get," Jared finished. They sat together as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other, lost each other, and found each other again. Two people who had chosen love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, hope over despair. The man had come back to the orc woman's door with a wedding ring, and she had said yes. Everything else, all the joy and struggle and triumph and sorrow, had flowed from that single brave choice, and it had been worth it. Every moment had been worth it.